Good morning out, excuse me. Good morning out there in Facebook land and YouTube land. Welcome to our Sunday service at the Home Spiritual Center. I'm waiting for feedback from the IT unit here. Okay, for our opening prayer for this service. God, thank you for the countless blessings we have received this year. Yes, and even thank you for the challenging times when we doubted that we had the strength to last until our blessings were here. Whatever challenges come into our lives, God, the universe we exist in, is continually surrounding us in unconditional universal love and light. A love and light, I might add, has always been here. I suggest that we acknowledge our blessings and existence today. Our love for ourselves, yes, self-love, will cause the right doors to open in our lives and for our loved ones as well. The work of our hands will bring to fulfillment all the love and the light that you have given to those in need. I pray that each of you will make your way purposeful and direct, your footsteps firm and with intent to outshine even God's light with your goodness and love. To those who bless our Home Spiritual Center weekly with their time and energy, thank you. Your sacrifice saves me from having to do the many works that you have so lovingly done. Thank you for showing me there are still some diehards out there willing to work for love. Amen. And now I turn the podium over to Reverend Madge.
Yes, we deeply appreciate our team of volunteers that keep this place looking pretty. Thank you, Angel, to you and your children. He's teaching, I admire him so much. He's teaching his children to be of service. And so Sue and I walked around the place the other day and lined up the jobs that could be done for the little ones and for the older ones. And can bring his kids over and teach them how to be of service. It's just beautiful. Come on. Am I on? Okay, there we go. So today we have a guest speaker. So honored to have my friend Ken Morris here. And Pastor Ken Morris is a frequent speaker on the topics of trauma stewardship, resilience, and post-traumatic growth. For 11 years, he was the chaplain at Salem Hospital, where he was part of a pilot project to provide resilience advocates for the emergency department staff. That role evolved into providing support for all hospital staff during the COVID pandemic. In his free time, he enjoys reading, playing the ukulele, discovering found objects suitable for making cigar box instruments. I love that. Makes you a very interesting person. And spending time with his wife and adult children. So help me welcome Ken Morris. Thank you. Oh, that's right. We only have two mics. We have to do a swap around.
So we'll do that. And then the other thing I'll do is take my watch off so I can see it because Madge said, you have a time limit.
I told him he could go long, though. He has some good stuff to share with us.
It's like, you've heard me speak before. You know where this could go. I remember doing a talk many years ago on a topic I knew well at the time, which was singleness. And I went for 50 minutes. And I realized something was amiss when someone started passing around a box of jujubes. It's like, try the black ones. They're really good. So the lesson was this was probably 2 25-minute talks instead of one 50-minute talk. So learned that a long time ago. Don't do that. So it's great to be here. Glad to be with you. And we find ourselves in a spot where it's like, what just happened? And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about where we are now and where we're going, and just the possibilities of where it is that we're going. So I'm going to use my new best friend, which is a little tablet that I picked up at the beginning of the pandemic. This is a Lenovo Yoga. That seems appropriate. And this has been the best little thing. It's like not lots of little pieces of paper. It's all here on the slide. So it's a great thing. So where have we been physically, physiologically, emotionally, and spiritually? What just happened? And as I've thought about this, in a lot of ways, what happened was a mass casualty incident at a glacial pace. Because we lost lots of folks, but it wasn't this sudden thing where it's boom and it's over. It happened over years. And it's hard to get your mind around just what happened because it was so slow. And one of the things that comes out of that is something that's called ambiguous grief. Maybe you've heard of that before. It's an idea that comes from the work of Pauline Boss to talk about a kind of loss without closure. And so she talks about a couple of different kinds of ambiguous grief. And the first one is physical absence with psychological presence. And that can be natural disasters, divorce, estrangement, incarceration, and separation due to immigration issues. So the person's still living, but they're not with you. The other kind is psychological absence with physical presence. And that can be things like dementia, traumatic brain injury, addiction, depression, and homelessness. So it's nice to have words to be able to talk about that, because we can sometimes be in the middle of something and it's like, I don't really know what's happening right now. I don't have words to describe that. So it's helpful to be able to talk about ambiguous grief. And in some ways, we're still kind of shaking this all out to say, what just happened?
So, Ken, I don't think I prefaced you as talking about COVID.
Okay.
And so I don't know if that's clear.
Right. And this can bring up a lot of different kinds of emotions. We can feel tapped out, depressed, exhausted. We use words like burnout, compassion fatigue, compassion satisfaction, post-traumatic growth, and allostatic load. Those are a lot of words. Some of them are kind of fancy. Allostatic load is basically just the wear and tear of living. And it's been hard because it's been a lot. In fact, we can say that life in normal times is kind of like a clawfoot bathtub, and it's totally full of water all the way to the top. And that's just normal life. And then the pandemic happened, and you throw a bowling ball in the bathtub. So what happens to all the water once you throw a bowling ball in there? It doesn't have any other choice but to go over the sides. And that's kind of what it was like. I don't want to belabor the past, but I think it's just good for us to be able to talk about where we've been. And there are two great things that seem to have come out of this as we look at the residue of the water starting to circle the drain a little bit. Now, where are we? And there seem to be two great takeaways from what happened. And it's a little bit like when I went to go see my sister who lives in another state, and the flight took me from where she lives to Las Vegas. And so on the way, I got to see Lake Mead. And the water was down at that point. The water hadn't come from the snowpack yet. And so one of the things that we saw from the shocking amount of drawdown from Lake Mead was there's this white residue on the sides of the lake where it used to be. And then as it came down, you saw the difference between where it used to be and where it was at that point. Thankfully, the water's starting to go back up again. And one of the words that they're talking about, folks that are in charge of such things, you think about all the different cities that are served by something like the Colorado River, they talk about it being oversubscribed. That just means there are too many people for the water that's actually running in the river, but they talk about it being oversubscribed. So, which is really kind of interesting because you look at someplace like Phoenix right now, and I think today's day 22, day 23 of over 110. It's like, thank God we don't live in a spot like that right now, because that's terrifying to think about living in a place like that. It's just not healthy to be outside. So we're grateful for places where you can go. And the thing that people from Phoenix will say is, but it's a dry heat. It's like, at that point, friend, I'm not sure that it matters. It's just not healthy. So the two great things that come out of this, the residue, if you will, are at both ends of the cycle of life. And one is for some of the more mature folks is isolation. The other thing at the other end for school age kids especially is anxiety. So we did a really great job of selling the idea of keep your distance during COVID. And you walk into a store and you see these little spots on the floor that say, keep 6 feet of distance between you and the person ahead of you and behind you in line. Or you can go into a grocery store and it would say one way. You can only go this direction. And then on the next aisle, you would go the other direction. So you don't have people crossing each other in the same aisle. We did a great job of selling that. But now that we're in a different spot, it's like in some people's minds, they just can't turn that off. It's like it was a great idea. And if the idea is, especially if you have an underlying health condition, and that's true for lots of folks. So you get situations like in retirement centers, especially, you have lots of people who are still eating alone. Because it's a good idea if I have an underlying health condition. I don't know what your current state is, and so I'm not going to take the risk of sitting with you because I just don't know, and I can't risk it. Or I'm going to get it to go, and I'll eat at home alone. So that's not a great thing, but it's happening a lot. And it's enough of a problem that the Surgeon General has decided that it is a health crisis in the United States, that there are so many people who are living in isolation. And he has said, it's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's like, yikes, that's terrible. And it's just a thing of what that does to human body. So that's one end of the scale. The other end is what's happening with our kiddos. And for many of them, it's like a school psychologist friend of mine says, many of these kids are 2 years behind and socially anxious. And so I just imagine a situation where you've got someone and they finally are able to go back to school in person. They're a junior in high school, but they haven't been in person with the other kids in school since they were in middle school. They're now juniors in high school, and they don't have the socialization of being with other kids in person for 2 years. That's an amazing space to be. So when we get to talking about adolescent mental health, there is a website. It's really quite fascinating to look at. It's called Crisis Trends, and it's really interesting to look at. And there have been over 8 million text conversations that have happened where primarily teenagers will text, and they may have some particular thing they want to talk to somebody about. And so they'll get in a text conversation with someone at the other end who is a trained counselor to be able to talk about whatever the issue is. So it can be bullying, it can be abuse, it can be neglect, it can be anxiety. There are a whole bunch of different things. And one of them is anxiety. And with that, they have measured all kinds of things. And so the people who study these kinds of things just go crazy about this, because it's what time of day are they calling? What day of the week are they calling? All kinds of different information. And one of the things that they've taken from that is something called a word cloud, which would be the most frequently used words. And they pick the top 35 words for each one of these different domains. And it's quite fascinating, because the words that show up in the domain of anxiety are people, better, school, friends, life, anxiety, hard, tell, always. The only word that shows up in every domain is mom. Mom. Not dad, but mom. Every time in 13 different domains, mom shows up. So super important. Part of our way of understanding what's been going on, just life in general, but especially when we kind of turn up the heat a little bit, is something called polyvagal theory. And the idea behind this, some of you may be familiar with, there's a little bundle of nerves at the base of your brain stem, and they go all different places in your body. And one of them is called the vagus nerve. And it comes from the same word for vagrant. It means wanderer. And so the vagus nerve actually cradles all the vital organs in your body. And so it's monitoring all the vital organs. And it's talking with the brain about what should be happening based on what it's taking in. And so I wish that I had a bigger copy of this, but just to give you a little bit of an idea, some of the work that's happened is talking about this being in a green zone, a yellow zone, or a red zone. And the green zone is you are totally in this Zen place. You're just in a good spot. But as you get more and more something kind of poking the bear a little bit, and you're a little more aroused emotionally, you get into a place where eventually you get into what we call fight or flight. And the vagus nerve will kick in, and all of a sudden, all the blood that would normally be in the core of your body would go to the big muscles, because you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to fight or you're going to flee. You're going to run. And so you need the blood going to those big muscles to do those two things. Well, if it keeps going, all of a sudden your body is going to say, you need to do something to feed your brain and feed your organs again, and so you'll faint, because your body knows that fluid seeks its own level, and so if you're horizontal, then that blood starts going to your brain and back into your core again. So it's kind of an interesting deal. It's really, it's something that I've explored with a friend of mine for 5 or 6 years. And every time I study something about this, I come away going, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I enjoy knowing more and more about that. But it also helps us to understand a little bit about what it was like being in a time of pandemic where we can't see people's faces. We're wearing masks, and so we can only see their eyes and we can't see them smile. And it's like, I'm getting an incomplete picture because I'm only seeing half of their face. And I was especially aware of that working in a hospital, working in an emergency room. So all of a sudden you're in a medical emergency and you've got people coming at you wearing a mask, and you can't tell if they're smiling or what's going on with them. And they're working on you, working on your body. Sometimes they're doing chest compressions on you. That's a little stressful. So just bearing those kinds of things in mind, knowing this is not a normal situation. I can't see your face. I can't be in close proximity. I'm not supposed to touch you. I'm supposed to be washing my hands all the time. Just all the different things that are just very different than my normal experience. I'm looking at my watch and I need to keep going. Thanks, Madge. And it's in times like that where we really need to kick into a different kind of thinking, because lots of times we can think about things and the thought is, what's wrong? And what we don't add is, what's wrong with you? If things don't seem to be quite right, the thing in some people's thinking is, what's wrong with you? And the question really needs to be, what happened to you? Something that we call trauma-informed care. And so I think if we come at things with more of an understanding of, I don't know everything that's going on right now. I had a high school principal tell me one time, I get a kid and he comes into my office, or she, I know 15% of the iceberg. I don't know the 85% of the iceberg beneath the surface of the water. I have no idea what's going on with this kid. I just know what I see, but I know that's not all there is. So trauma-informed care. Because people are not problems to be solved, but wonders to behold. So where do we go from here? G.K. Chesterton said, gratitude is thanks doubled by wonder. I really like that a lot. And one of the things that I used to do, going back and forth from the hospital to home, there was this one spot, lots of times it would be right at sunset, and so I would stop and take a picture. Because I wanted to remember that. I'm going to do this again. Gosh, I wish I could. Just to be able to take a picture of a sunset and go, man, that was amazing. Just something bigger than me. I remember I have something else I wanted to read. It's in my bag. Let me grab that real quick. And after I read this, I want to talk a little bit about post-traumatic growth. Thank you, ma'am. I think one of the things that we can be most grateful for is the people who surround us and our friends. And I found something called Garden Meditation by a Unitarian minister named Max Kutz. Maybe some of you are familiar with him. But he is a gardener, and he talks a little bit about giving thanks for our friends, because giving thanks is so incredibly important. Let us give thanks for a bounty of people, for children who are our second planting. And though they grow like weeds and the wind too soon blows them away, may they forgive us our cultivation and fondly remember where their roots are. Let us give thanks. For generous friends with hearts and smiles as bright as their blossoms, for feisty friends as tart as apples. For continuous friends who, like scallions and cucumbers, keep reminding us that we've had them. For crotchety friends, sour as rhubarb and as indestructible. For handsome friends who are as gorgeous as eggplant and as elegant as a row of corn, and the others as plain as potatoes and so good for you. For funny friends who are silly as Brussels sprouts and as amusing as Jerusalem artichokes. For serious friends as unpretentious as cabbages, as subtle as summer squash, as persistent as parsley, as delightful as dill, as endless as zucchini. Thank God for those friends of ours who bestow upon us zucchini the size of an outrigger canoe. You know? And who, like parsnips, can be counted on to see you through the winter. For old friends nodding like sunflowers in the evening time, and young friends coming on as fast as radishes. For loving friends who wind around us like tendrils and hold us, despite our blights, wilts, and witherings. And finally, for those friends now gone, like gardens past, that have been harvested, but who feed us in their times, that we might have life thereafter. For all these we give thanks. We know people like that. And this particular poem is just so insightful because it just gives us a sense of we have been holding our breath for so long. And what we just witnessed, I heard a couple people sigh. And there is in my line of work something we look for called a golden sigh, where people have just been holding it in for so long. And finally, they find a reason to be able to stop holding their breath. And it seems to me that's what this time is about, as we have a chance to give thanks and remember where we are, pat ourselves down, and see that we are 95% whole. To be able to experience post-traumatic growth. To be able to see there are difficult things that we go through, and in the going through them, our ability and our capacity to be able to live a challenging life only grows. One of my kids did cross country when they were in high school. And it all was summed up for me, knowing that after school she would go run miles and miles and miles. And we were at a meet and I saw a dad that had a t-shirt, and on the back it said, "My sport is your sport's punishment." Running, that's my sport. And I thought, this is hard. It's not something I would want to necessarily voluntarily take on. I don't want to do that. And afterwards, she thinks about that and she said, having done that, I'm glad I did it, but I can't believe I committed to doing that. It was hard. But there are just lots of things like that. We get plunged into situations and we do it because we know we need to. And in the end, we look at that and we're not diminished. We're actually bigger. And it's really quite an amazing thing as we come out of this and we realize there's hope for us. There is a greater capacity to love, to be able to accept people for where they are, to be patient. And I think that's one of the great gifts that, if we can say this, that the pandemic gave us, was just the ability to realize that we can actually be made bigger by something that some people have just been made smaller by, which is unfortunate. We get a chance to redeem the voices that weary us, because knowing that they can be redeemed it means that we can turn the volume down on the lies that suggest that God resents us, is ambivalent toward our sorrow, and will not come through for us in the end. We don't believe that. We believe that God is here for us all the time, even when it doesn't seem like that's true. We know a different story. I'm grateful for every one of you for being here. I'm grateful for Madge. I'm grateful for Tech Guy.
His name is Jerry.
I know. Because yeah, there's still time. Because when tech's a great thing, but when tech's not your friend, it's really not your friend. So I'm grateful. So I think we can all find things to be grateful for. I'm at my limit, so I'm going to stop talking. But I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful to see where we're going to end up going forward. I do want to mention just one little black swan that's come out of all of this. The idea of, where do we go with the adolescent stress and all of those kinds of things. One of the things that happened during COVID was that there was a school, but a major nursing school in this area, Concordia, that closed. Some of you may know that there was money that was given by Steve Ballmer, who's one of the founders of Microsoft. And I believe this fall, the Ballmer School of Adolescent Social Work will open. So even when we think, oh, that's a bad thing, until we know the whole story, we don't know if it's a bad thing or not. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. That was wonderful. I love the information that you gathered together. It, stress and post-traumatic growth is real. I love that term. What a great way to spin it. So let's just take a few minutes and go into a meditation just to kind of seat the information that we heard and the spirit that we felt. So close your eyes and let's take a deep breath and release that air that we've been holding. Knowing now we can release whatever it is that might be a residual from the times that we have come through, and just breathe deeply into the depths of our lungs and start anew, knowing that we have great things yet to come, bigger ways to grow, and find that strength inside of you. Perhaps it's a visual of a seedling coming out of the dirt of the residue of our last few years that is going to sprout and grow inside of you into a new beginning, into a better version or bigger version of yourself, finding your strengths, your gifts that are God-given, that can be utilized in the service to humanity. And feel that growing inside of you. Use the visual if you need to, and just let that expand and grow and becoming more and more a part of you. And knowing that in these times that there are those golden nuggets that we can know that is within each and every one of us to be a bigger and better version of ourselves. And in that expression of our God-given talents, we know that we can be of service to each other and to the greater good of the whole. And let it be so. Amen. All right. So I am good. Oh, we're going to do the offering now? Yeah. So let's take our gift to the home center. Let's put it between our hands. And we do have PayPal for those of you online, paypal.me, homecentersalem.com, I think. Home Center Salem something. Home Center Salem. All of a sudden it's like, wait, what am I doing? Yeah. So thank you for your generous donations. We knowing that this gift is being blessed by you, coming through the home center, blessing the home center, going through the flow of the universe, and coming back to you 100 times, bringing to you all of your wants, needs, and desires that are going to serve your highest and your greatest good. Let that be so. Amen. All right. So while the basket's going around, Dick's going to come up and share his inspiration, his thoughts, and then we'll have a closing prayer and close out our broadcast. Thank you, folks, for being with us.
Can't find the button.
Now he's hot.
Thank you. Appreciate the help at my age. My closing statement, this is before the prayer, is from remembering who you truly are. Surprise, surprise. It's God's Day 326, called acceptance. This is what he has to say. To love what is. Learn to love what is. Love it just as it is. Trying to change someone in your life to what you think they should be or should act like won't work. Holding back your acceptance of or love only aggravates the situation. Instead, love and bless the presence of God in them, beyond what you find hard to accept. That includes loving yourself just the way you are, too. Look with the eyes of God and see the perfection beyond appearances. Isn't that how you want others to look at you? You want them to see through your outer faults to the beauty and goodness that lies latent in you, the perfect isness. So today, remember to look past the outer and love that isness. And now for our closing prayer. God, as we depart from Sunday service, thank you for the opportunity to reconnect with old friends and meet new friends, and for the memories we've shared with old friends and new memories we are making with our new friends. That's a Troward sentence for those of you who know. I bless each individual present here today. May my blessing go with you in your daily lives. May you live with purpose and make a positive impact on your world. As you go, cherish the relationships you have formed and nurture them with love and understanding. Fill your hearts with love and compassion, and extend your kindness to all those you meet on your path. May you have the courage to embrace the new adventures and opportunities that lie ahead. May you always find strength in your unity and support one another in times of need. And above all, may you share your light with the world so those who are seeking the light can find their way to the light. In God and Christ, love and light, I pray. Amen. And now to Facebook and YouTube. This is the end of our Sunday service. We'll see you again next week. Home Center out.